You didn't tell her about the other will? The attorney asked, and suddenly nobody at the table could look at me. My mom's face went pale. My dad actually stood up like he was about to stop the meeting right there, and my younger sister Emily just stared at me, whispering, "What other will?" We were sitting in my grandfather's lawyer's office the morning after his funeral, and 10 minutes earlier, they'd all smiled while a new will was read out loud, one that conveniently left almost everything to them. Meanwhile, I got his watch, the same grandfather I'd spent 3 years caring for while they barely visited him. But the night before this meeting, I opened the hidden compartment in his desk and took the original signed will he personally showed me before he died. And when I finally slid the sealed envelope onto the lawyer's desk, my father slammed his hand down and said, "Don't you dare open that." The room went dead quiet after he said it. Not awkward quiet, not funeral quiet. The kind of silence where everybody suddenly realizes something has gone very, very wrong. Attorney Mitchell slowly looked up from the folder in front of him. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "why exactly would you object to reviewing another signed document?" My dad's jaw tightened instantly. "Because she's emotional," he snapped, pointing at me without even looking my way. "She's upset she didn't get what she expected." I almost laughed at that. Expected? For 3 years, I drove my grandfather Arthur to every medical appointment after his stroke. I organized his medications. I stayed overnight when he got scared to be alone. Half the time, my parents didn't even answer his calls. But now, suddenly, they were the devoted family. Emily crossed her arms and leaned back in her chair like she already owned everything. "Grandpa changed his mind, Lena. You need to accept that." That sentence hit harder than I expected because I knew exactly when things started changing. About 2 weeks before my grandfather died, my dad started visiting him constantly, not helping, not caring for him, just disappearing into his office for hours with the door closed. After one of those visits, Grandpa called me late that night. I still remembered his voice. Tired, uneasy. "Kiddo," he'd said quietly, "if anything confusing happens after I'm gone, trust what I already signed." At the time, I thought he was talking about funeral plans. Now I knew better. Attorney Mitchell reached toward the envelope in front of me, but before he could touch it, my mother suddenly spoke for the first time. "Lena," she said carefully, "where exactly did you get that document?" I looked directly at her. "The same place Grandpa hid it after he told me he was afraid somebody would try to change it." Emily's confidence disappeared instantly. And then I noticed something I hadn't before. The signature date on the new will sitting on the attorney's desk. My stomach dropped. Because according to that document, my grandfather supposedly signed it the exact same day he was admitted to the hospital, heavily medicated after his second stroke. I looked up slowly. "Wait," I said, and for the first time all morning, the attorney looked nervous too. Attorney Mitchell adjusted his glasses and looked back down at the paperwork. "Your grandfather signed this revised will on March 14th, he said carefully. "That's impossible," I replied immediately. "I was with him that morning." My dad scoffed. "Here we go." But I kept going. He could barely hold a pen that day. The hospital had him on medication after the stroke. Nobody answered me, and that silence said more than anything else. Emily suddenly leaned forward. "So what?" "Grandpa realized you were manipulating him." I stared at her. "Manipulating him? You visited him twice last year." My mother cut in sharply before Emily could respond. "Arthur felt guilty leaving everything to one person. But that wasn't true. Grandpa had shown me the original will himself 3 months earlier inside his study. Calm, certain, completely clear-minded. The house went to me. Everything else was divided fairly. Attorney Mitchell slowly looked between all of us. Mr. Carter, were there witnesses present when this revised document was signed? My father's expression changed instantly. Too fast, too defensive. Then he said, "Why does that matter?" The attorney didn't answer right away, which only made the room feel tighter. I reached into my bag and placed a second paper beside the envelope. "That's the hospital admission record," I said. Time-stamped 3 hours before this new will was supposedly signed. Emily looked confused now instead of smug. My dad didn't even glance at the paper. "You went digging through private records?" I was his medical proxy, I shot back. Because nobody else bothered showing up. That hit harder than I expected. My mom looked away immediately. Attorney Mitchell picked up the record slowly. "Mr. Carter, this says Arthur was under heavy neurological observation that entire afternoon." "No," my father said quickly. "There must be some mistake." But now even the attorney sounded uneasy. Then I noticed something else. The witness signatures on the revised will. I knew both names. Neither of them were family friends. They worked for my father's construction company. I looked straight at him. "You brought your own witnesses?" And for the first time that morning, my father looked genuinely cornered. My father pushed his chair back so hard it scraped across the floor. "This meeting is over," he said. But Attorney Mitchell didn't move. He was staring at both wills side by side now, comparing signatures line by line. "The initials are inconsistent," he murmured, "and these witness signatures were never notarized." Emily looked back and forth between our parents in panic. "Wait, you told me Grandpa changed it himself." Nobody answered her. That was answer enough. I finally slid the sealed envelope fully across the desk. "The original stayed locked in Grandpa's hidden compartment until last night," I said quietly. "And somebody had already searched the office before I got there." My mother's face crumpled instantly. "Lena," she whispered. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at my dad. Because suddenly I remembered one more thing Grandpa told me during our last conversation. "If anyone challenges the will," he'd said, "play the recording." Attorney Mitchell looked up sharply. "Recording?" I nodded slowly. "There's audio of the conversation the night my father tried convincing him to change everything." Nobody spoke after that. My father looked like he'd stopped breathing entirely. Attorney Mitchell asked me to play the recording, and the second my grandfather's voice filled the office, my mother started crying quietly. Arthur sounded tired, but completely clear. "I already decided where everything goes," he said firmly. "Lena took care of me when nobody else did." Then my father's voice came through. "People are going to think you abandoned your real family." "I am taking care of my real family," Grandpa answered. The room felt frozen. Emily slowly turned toward our parents. "You lied to me too?" Neither of them could answer. Within days, the attorney formally challenged the revised will. Handwriting experts confirmed the signature had been forged using copied financial documents. The witnesses admitted my father asked them to sign without seeing Arthur present. The estate was frozen immediately. My father ended up under investigation for fraud, and relatives who defended him at first completely backed away once the recording surfaced. Emily lost the condo she'd already placed a deposit on. My parents separated a few months later. And me? I inherited Grandpa's house exactly the way he intended. A few weeks after everything settled, I went back into his study and opened the hidden compartment one last time. Inside was a folded handwritten note. Just one sentence. "I knew you'd protect the truth." And honestly, that meant more to me than the inheritance ever did.